So we get a lot of questions about finding the right clinic, and this is a follow-up video just to go over some basic principles of how IVF clinics work in the United States. Hey, Kathy Bernardo here from the Northeast Assisted Fertility Group. Well, there are three basic types of clinics in the United States. The most prevalent ones are these big commercial clinics that are owned by these big conglomerates like US Fertility, IVI, and Fertility First. And chances are, if you're working in a clinic, it's one of these privately owned companies. And then the second kind is a more research university-based clinic. And then the third kind, which there are fewer and fewer every year. When we started in this 20 years ago, there are lots of them, and now they're all getting eaten up by the corporations, are the small, independent, more boutique-y clinics. And like I said, there are fewer and fewer of these around. Now, you can get excellent care at any of these. I'm just describing them. I'm not saying one is better than the other. Maybe in the general sense, some have more strengths and some have more weaknesses in certain areas. But that's just generally, each one is different. And of course, a lot depends on your own relationship with your doctor, which may be the most important thing to you. But I find generally working with the big corporate type clinics, they have a large staff and a very kind of well-oiled machine on the administrative side, which is, as an agency and as a patient, you probably have more day-to-day interaction with the nurses and the IVF coordinator, the third-party coordinator. Each doctor, there's always like a team of doctors at these big places. Each doctor has his or her own nursing staff, and you deal most day-to-day with that person. So the big IVF places, those corporately owned places, they administratively, they tend to be very strong. So if communication is really important, I'm finding that the bigger privately owned corporate type places who have these very strong support staffs are pretty good with communication in general. Now, with the university places, they tend to be more research-based. They have very good labs, very good doctors, but their admin staff tends to be a little leaner, and their communication isn't as kind of like streamlined to professional. Again, this is just general. And then with the independent places, it's really hit or miss because it's whoever happens to be working there and their system of communication. So like I said, first and foremost, it's your own relationship with your doctor. You have to have a good relationship, feel good with that doctor. And everyone feels differently. I've had some people go to one clinic and say, oh, I felt like a number there. And then another person say at that clinic, I felt really like they cared personally about me. And it's really a very subjective kind of thing. But I also want to emphasize to anyone going into this IVF for the first time that the magic of IVF, or what really matters in the end, is the lab. It's the embryologist. So it's like a restaurant, you know, there's like the maitre d' and the waiter, and that is like your own firsthand experience. You don't really see what goes on in the kitchen, and you don't know who's cooking, but that's what you're eating, right? So all the magic of IVF and what really the most important thing that happens, all the science, is the embryologist in the lab, and you don't meet your embryologist typically, and you don't even see the lab. So how do you know? All of these places can have fantastic labs. In my previous video, I walked you through SART, the Society of Assisted Reproductive Technologies website, where they post statistics for various clinics all over the country. And usually any legitimate clinic has to report their statistics to the CDC. And SART is optional, but they most tend to display their stats on SART. And it can be really confusing. You can take a look and say, oh, this one's more successful than this one, and all that. It can be very misleading, these statistics. But what I tend to look for is who's got a lot of experience doing this. Who does the most? For example, if you're just doing straight IVF, or you're doing frozen egg or fresh donor egg or frozen donor egg. Take a look and see how many they do. And usually the more they do, the more experience they have. And the more experience they have, the better they'll be at it. That's the most general rule of thumb. But again, I think it's just important for everyone to know when you're into this fertility industry and you think to understand how these IVF clinic works. The big corporate clinics have to answer to a board of directors, and the universities are more toward research, and then the boutique places really they report to the FDA and the CDC, of course, but it's really up to the doctor who owns that practice. So if you want to do third party, they may have certain rules. For example, certain IVF clinics, especially those corporate ones, have certain deals with certain banks, frozen egg banks, and you can't go outside to look for frozen eggs in other places, and you're restricted to those banks. So if it's important to you to cast a wide net to look for the perfect donor and you don't find anything at those banks, then that may not be a good fit for you. So again, it's very individual, and you can get wonderful care at any kind of IVF clinic that's legitimate and registered with the Society for Assisted Reproductive Technology. So there's not one type that's better than the other, but be aware they do work a little bit differently, and you want to find one that suits your needs. And remember, it's all in the lab. It's not necessarily the doctor. You got to like your doctor, yes, but especially the corporate places, they work as a team, and the lab is the most important thing in your experience in the end that determines your success. So I hope that was helpful. Please comment below. I'll have links to other resources in the description. Give me a thumbs up and go to assistedfertility.com for more information on surrogacy and egg donation. Thanks so much for watching.